First of all, I want to thank you all for being here, yes, for trekking out. And a perfect way to sort of open up the 50th anniversary Women in Film screening series, and obviously very, very topical. I could hear all the like, woo, so. So, I'm sorry?
Never mind.
Is someone saying something already? Are we already getting heckles? Okay, so I'm going to ask the first question actually to the producers. And first of all, I mean, at the time this was made, you were two very strong female producers. Can you speak to kind of, especially, in this current climate, looking back and thinking about what it was like then to sort of take a, sort of controversial subject, in particular this book that you optioned. Can you kind of speak to the process and how that kind of came about?
Well, everything that we tried to do was difficult. Two young women in a male industry, a male-dominated industry, was very difficult. But a political story was almost impossible.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. It was interesting because I had been in film distribution. I'd met Tamara, who was a budding producer and the first producer in Hollywood to make movies on her credit card. And Roger Corman, for whom I worked, was a wonderful supporter of women. Everyone, yes, all the women were in the office, and we got together, decided to go into business together, and I had found this article in the New York Times 3 years before, but I knew it couldn't be sold. And then Rocky came out. Rocky came from nowhere,
right,
starring nobody, and it was a gigantic hit, and suddenly I said, we have the female version of Rocky.
Yes.
And that triggered the cash register in a very few people, but interesting people, Martin Ritt, Alan Ladd Jr.'s mind. So, and Guy McElwain, the agent who put it all together. And of course, Martin Ritt, who was right on it.
Yeah.
So, I can't speak enough for him.
I have to tell the story.
Please, and hold the mic right here.
Right like there. Okay, so Guy McElwain, unfortunately passed away, was our agent. And I think we had dinner one night.
Yes,
and
that's
I
right.
said, Alex and I looked at HUD, and Marty Ritt would be the perfect director for this film. And he said, it's very funny, I'm going to have dinner with him tomorrow night. Get me a synopsis of the story. So we did, and he had dinner with Marty and his wife, and called me up the next morning, and he said, we were at Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers.
Yes, that's
and
right.
Marty was at Columbia, but it was all in one lot. And he said, Marty would like to talk to you girls. Can you go over and meet him? So we went over and met him. And he said, well, it's an interesting story. If you get a writer that I like, I'll read the script.
I think he even said the Ravages. If you get the Ravages to do this, I'll consider it.
Well, anyhow, it was tough.
Yeah.
So by the time we got back to our office, Guy McElwain called again, and he said, Marty, those two pretty actresses have a good idea.
And by the way, we were known in Hollywood as the girls. All the business affairs people knew us as the girls. We were always called the girls. Everyone knew who the girls were because we were the first female producing team in the history of Hollywood.
I mean, you're in the right room for that. And then how did you guys, once you had this incredible entity and you started to package this really special story and film, how did Sally Field come into your orbit?
Oh, weren't we lucky? We were so lucky.
Didn't.
And it was so difficult.
Not for a long time.
First place, how do we get the film financed to begin with and get it written? Guy McElwain's best friend was Alan Ladd Jr., and he was head of production at 20th Century Fox. And that year, Fox had made Star Wars, and they'd made a lot of money. And Alan Ladd decided he'd take, a flyer on some difficult films.
And if we cut our salaries in half,
That's right. We cut
and we had
ourselves
to, it was very good in a sense because we had a gross position to make up the salary, but we had to show as filmmakers, and Marty Ritt also had to cut salaries in half.
Okay.
So it was
And
a
the
very interesting
Ravages.
deal. And the Ravages, we all did, because we all felt very strongly about the film. And
And we've never seen a penny of our profit, by the way.
well, we did finally, we sued. We got a little, a teeny bit. But the film was so successful, and Sally won Best Actress at Cannes. And that was the most tearful, exciting moment. Laddie was even crying.
We all started crying.
We all were sobbing. It was so amazing.
Sally, from your, just because I do want to get you involved here in this conversation, because I mean, just how did this script come to you? Can you get into it?
I had already been an entity because I started in television in 1964. This movie was made in 1979. And I was in situation comedy television in the 60s, and you don't get out of that. Not if you're a woman, you don't get out. I mean, if you were a man and you were doing, Maverick, or you were Steve McQueen and he came out of television, but as a woman in doing situation comedy television, you died there. But I just would not let that go. I wanted to be an actor. That's what I had come out of high school and junior high school. It was my voice with myself. And I then worked with Lee Strasberg and blah, blah, blah. I did all this, and I was inching my way through, slicing my wrists and saying to myself, if I wasn't where I wanted to be, it wasn't because of them. It wasn't because of the big them who wouldn't let me in the room, which they wouldn't. I wasn't allowed to come in the room and audition for anything even, or be on the list. It was because I wasn't good enough. If I could keep my own power, and it rested in me, and incrementally, I made my way to something. My first audition was for a little tiny film that Bob Rafelson did called Stay Hungry. And then because the Diane Crittenden, wonderful casting woman named Diane Crittenden, who recognized something in me, and also because I'd been at the Actors Studio long enough to create some sort of underground reputation in those days when you could do that. She then brought me in for another audition where no one in the room wanted me there, where you could hear them. I'd be waiting to go in, and I'd hear people in there saying, "What the hell are you wasting our time for?" And I knew then how to use that anger that I felt. I knew how to use that as fuel and not let it just make me unravel. And I came in for my second audition that Diane Crittenden invited me to, which was for something called Sybil. And no one wanted me there. No one in the room wanted me. But I had to be that good. I had to come in as Sybil. Right. And not think in my head I would ever get out. And there was a time when I didn't think I would get out. And out of Sybil, they saw me. They had mentioned it to Marty, but Marty was a Actors Studio baby. He came from that world. He began it with Lee in the group theater. And he sort of knew this world. He too saw Sybil. I was still fighting for a spot. Give me a spot. Let me audition for something where I can do what I now know how to do. This was the first thing that came to me. This came to me when I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, doing a girl role, because I had 2 kids. I had to survive. And it was a screenplay from Marty Ritt, who was known as a real actor's director. And I read the script on the plane on my way to LA to meet with Marty. And no, I didn't. That's not true. They weren't able to get it to me. I hadn't read the script. So I got off the plane. My mother had read it. She was taking care of my 2 kids. And I said, what is it about? What is it? I don't know. I got to get ready. And she's like saying, well, it's this like really downtrodden thing. It's kind of depressing. I don't know. I went into the meeting with Marty dressed in beige because I didn't know why. I had no character to come in as. Right. And Marty said to me, and I will never forget, he said to me, he didn't say all those things like, blah, 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 what do you think of the role? He said, are you serious about your work? And I said, yes. And he said, this has been offered to 3 other women, 4 other women by then.
7.
7 other women by then. I was hoping it was only 3 or 4, but okay, 7.
7, okay.
And every one they could think of that had ever been in a movie before. Starred in a movie before, had been out. And they had all turned it down.
Oh.
He said, and Marty said to me, he believes that things happened as they were supposed to happen. That no one in the studio wanted me, that he wanted me. And if I read the script and wanted to do it, he'd fight for me and he'd win. And he did, and I was there.
Great story.
I want to say one thing about Marty Ritt was he was a blacklisted director, actor. And so he knew how to fight.
Right.
Yes, and he had made his living becoming one of America's top racehorse handicappers because that's all he could do, and he, fed his family handicapping racehorses. He really.
And he was blacklisted, yeah.
Yeah.
So so just, this is already like a wild story, but once you read it, your mom read it first.
My mom read it.
And then she approved, even though she thought it was downbeat, as it were. Anyway, so you, in the process, right, of all of you as filmmakers making this piece, what was the sort of research and kind of, grunt work of kind of, getting into the headspace of telling a story with this kind of accuracy?
Well, it was a true story to begin with. And the guy that wrote the cover of the New York Times magazine wrote the book, and we optioned the book, and the book came with the real person, Crystal Lee Jordan. And she got...
Crystal Lee Sutton, wasn't it?
Yes.
Sutton.
Well, she
So
had 2 names.
number names.
Yes.
Many, many names, I think.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we had showed a civil to Laddie and his team,
Right.
and they said fine. So we were ready to go, and the Ravages had written this wonderful script. They were a husband and wife team, and you can see both of their ability in this film. Anyhow, so suddenly we find out that the girl, Crystal Lee, thinks that we're all too Hollywood, and she doesn't want it made. And what happened was Barbara Koppel, who's a brilliant documentary filmmaker, wanted to do a documentary about her, and hired lawyers, and so they were going to break the contract.
Okay.
So Marty and I flew to Opelika. No, we flew to
North Carolina.
yeah, what was it? I forget where it was.
North Carolina.
All I remember is an all-night flight, and we had to spend the night in...
And our attorney, Larry Mortorf, went with you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and we were to meet her and show her that who we are and how earnest we were, and we weren't Hollywood.
Right.
And we never got to meet her. Just her lawyers, and her lawyers
really?
said, we're going to sue you.
And Fox, fortunately, what had happened, she had had a very, very early contract with Warren Lieberfarb for person who wrote the book. And Fox was so strong, Laddie said, we'll pay what you want. And he made the salary for the book, the option, very high. And then they said, okay.
Got it. Well, let me, just speaking of financials for a second, because I had read in the notes that initially it was slated to be, I think, 40 days or 54 days, but then ended up being shorter
Right.
because of the way it was shot, which I thought that was,
That was Martin Ritt.
yeah.
Well,
can
it
you
was
speak to
John
that?
Alonso as well, and it was me.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's really interesting.
You know, we just became, first of all, it was unusual in because something we don't do today, unfortunately. We had 2 weeks rehearsal, which is invaluable, and you don't do that today. Rarely do you have like 24 hours rehearsal on even the biggest of films. And in those days, we were there in Opelika, and we were living in it. I was working in the mill. I was meeting everybody. I could hear the language, and we had 2 weeks rehearsal. So we were really ready to go. And the fact that John Alonso, the brilliant cinematographer John Alonso, was shooting it all handheld. That was all handheld.
And no
very,
generator.
very few shots with
difficult.
dollies or any of that. It was mostly Alonso holding that camera on his back,
Yeah.
and or his operator, rarely, who's John Toll, who's
Oh, yeah,
a
John
brilliant cinematographer today. So we were going so fast.
Yeah.
We were shooting so fast. We knew Marty knew exactly what he wanted. There wasn't any fluff. He wasn't like doing things in case he needed it. We were there. And sometimes in the day, we would have to slow down. He would say, you know, we were like finished at noon. And he's like, this isn't good. The studio's going to think we're just phoning something in. Let's just slow down. And so we ended up with way less days than we were scheduled to shoot because we were so fast.
And $500,000 less.
Yeah, I mean,
Which was huge. And in those days, what we were, $6 million, that was a big film. You know,
Sure.
that was good size. So to knock off $500,000 off that budget
Right.
was fantastic. And it was Sally and Marty. But 2 weeks of rehearsal on location?
yeah, that's
Who
so
does
interesting.
that?
Yeah,
We had
you
a
were
very-
working there? You said you were, sorry, I just want to clarify, you were able to,
I was working, I got to work in the mill. I wasn't very good at it, I must say, but because yikes, that wasn't easy. But we were there with the weaving machines. We were able to.
Yes.
I was able to understand what was actually done, and you know how the throttles worked and all of that. I was awful. God forbid anybody should use that fabric for anything that I made. Was full of holes, and it was awful.
well, it leads me to my next question, which is, I think, you know, it feels improvisational at times, even though I'm seeing, okay, they're shooting this in one shot. And so it feels like it either could be extremely well rehearsed and scripted or a little off book. Can you speak to that?
You know what? Me, I work very improvisationally, but I knew and I had such great regard for the Ravages and this magnificent script that had been handed me. So I would work, you know, alone at home, and I knew things I wanted to do and pretend it just came out of my mouth. Oops, gee, what was that? The kvetch,
Yeah.
is just mine that I said, but I knew I wanted to say it because I knew I needed to worm my way in without making a big deal out of it and saying, I think I want to do this, and have them go, no, I think not. Because I wasn't going to give them the chance to say that. I was just going to, oops, that just came out. I needed to find Norma's humor.
Yeah,
Because, you know, without that, because humor makes you care about somebody more, because it means they're not taking themselves seriously. So you had to see Norma's humor, and I had to find my way into that. It wasn't always on the page in that, and I would noodle my way into it.
When you said the rehearsals were for you, were they with the entire extended cast or just the core players?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because you can feel the.
Mostly, Bo was a little late because he was doing another film, but Ron and I were there. And the other, Pat Hingle, brilliant Pat Hingle was there. The other thing about this film, and you guys can say this, is it was so important to me too. So many of those players are the real deal.
Yeah.
They're the
I
real
can
deal.
say that.
A lot of them are real locals. They'd never acted before. And a lot of them were local actors that came from community theaters, and they came from, and you feel that.
Yes.
I felt that working with we were improvisational when we had like meetings of the, sitting around the living room. I remember one time we had that scene where we're sitting around the living room talking about our grievances. And there was a young black man there who just began to speak. And he wasn't supposed to speak, but he just began to speak because it was what was going on with him. And it killed me. It was so real and so exactly what his life was and what he was feeling. And he was just caught up in, we're talking about this is what's really happening. And a lot of that is going on in the film. The locals, be they white and be they black, be they male and be they female.
Right.
That was very
Were you-
important.
yeah, were
What
you
I was
gonna-
going to say is, since it was a true story, it was a J.P. Stevens story, all of the mills wouldn't rent us a mill
No,
or
that's
let
right.
us shoot.
Yeah, that's a
It was
great story.
impossible. I went to New York, I met the head of the union, and with help, and we just couldn't. Finally, he said, there's this one mill
Right.
owned by a family in Chicago, and they're going bankrupt.
Yeah, they're selling the place anyway.
Right.
He said, try them. So we tried them. We got that mill. That's where we shot, and we hired every worker in the mill.
Also,
In Opelika, Alabama, yeah.
also
Brilliant.
they first even said no, but Fox knew they were going bankrupt and offered them a huge amount of money. And suddenly, it all changed.
Yeah.
But the politics in the South in those days were lamentable. And what's interesting is how much is going on today that was exactly going on then.
Yeah, do you want to speak to that a little bit? I think, the.
When we went to go look at locations,
the,
I thought the Civil War had ended.
Yes.
I'd never been to the South, and I was
Me neither.
shocked.
Yeah, there is so much in this film, culturally, socially, and obviously in the climate that we sit in now with, with the strikes in our industry, but then additionally just thinking about social injustices that seem not far off from where we are.
Today,
Yeah,
with the affirmative action being turned down.
exactly.
Just today. But
Also, when we were shooting, Ron's speech was really important.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And we shot that, and because John Alonzo had not wanted to bring a generator, we'd hook up electrical wherever we went. And that old church, the electrical was faulty, but no one could see that until the film was sent to the lab in Los Angeles, and it had a flicker, like a glow that would go on and off through his whole speech. So we had to, at that point, beef up the electrical in that church, and Ron had to do the whole thing
Shit.
over again. And when we were working in the church, these two lovely blue-haired ladies came up and said, what do you all want to do with this ugly old black church? We got a nice white church around the corner. You should be shooting there. I mean, that's the kind of thing that was just common parlance. It was just like that. And I, too, hadn't been to the South. And it was really surprising to us.
Right.
But that's
I have to say one thing. When we saw the first takes, or you know, you send them to the lab, come back and you look at them. The first dailies was the scene with Sally saying, "What is it, my mother, not my mother?" That scene.
Oh, you mean the first day in the mill?
Oh, okay.
Yes, not my mother.
And we knew that Sally
Right.
was Norma Rae.
She had come,
From the dailies, you knew that.
Wonderful job, and we knew she was a star.
Well, yeah, I mean, let me just, let's give a clap there. But I do, and I will start to close because I know it's late, and I will let you go. But looking back on it, I know we did sort of watch the movie a little bit towards the end there.
2 seconds.
I know, 2 seconds of the movie. But, obviously this is an iconic movie, and it, holds and it resonates so much right now. But also your performance is so powerful. When when audiences are like screaming and clapping for you in that moment when you hold that sign, I just wonder how that feels. Because being in this audience and thinking that we were going to get a chance to talk to you, it's iconic. And that is you. You perform that as such a young woman, and I do want to commend you for that. Just this is a film community, and you being here it's really important. I mean, all of you, you're tremendous filmmakers. So, thank you.
thank you so much, Bill. Blake.
Well, women in film is important. Collective bargaining is important.
Yes.
It is what democracy is. Our democracy is being challenged in a big way. But our unions are doing what they do. They're negotiating and scrabbling, and we will find our way out of this. The writers will, and we don't know if the actors are going to go out, even though they've been given authority to do that. The directors have settled, and our industry will continue to thrive, and the unions are incredibly important in that. I know as an actor who started in 1964, I know the changes that have happened from my union fighting to make some changes from when I started in 1964. So it's incredibly important. But they're important all over this country, all over the country.
And every industry.
Whoever they are, it's important to have collective bargaining. You can be wrong as a union. You can have union leaders that should be shoved out. Lord knows you can have bad leadership, but you need collective bargaining for the workforce. And we need to have a country. We have to remember we are a country of a workforce.
Correct.
That's the importance of us. That's what a democracy is. So I'm glad to be here for Women in Film. I'm very proud that Norma continues to be what Norma is and was. And it boggles my mind, but it feels slightly like it's not me. It's Norma and not me. When I'd been asked earlier to do screenings for the Writers Guild, I worried, and I have such, Lord knows I'd be nowhere without the writers, but I feel very protective of Norma and of this character, and I know she represents someone who stood on a table with a union sign over her head. But that's Norma. That's not me. I hope that I would have the guts to do that, but I haven't as of yet. And I may someday. But not if all of us stand together I won't need to. I won't need to be a Norma. Norma will be Norma. But thank you, everyone, for coming to watch this film.
Thank you.
It's incredibly important in my life and all of our lives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to do
all.
a quick picture.
Thank you so much.